What if I told you that your kindness might be the reason you're being overlooked and underestimated? Machiavelli believed love is fragile, but fear can be transformational. Stick around to discover how fear and respect, when balanced perfectly, can command loyalty without breeding hatred. When it comes to power and influence, Machiavelli didn't waste time with comforting illusions. He understood that love is a delicate currency, easily spent, easily lost. In his eyes, love is always conditional, shaped by self-interest and shifting circumstances. As he put it is much safer to be feared than loved. Why? Because people love you only as long as it serves their needs. The moment your usefulness fades or their interests change, that love can vanish overnight. If you put your faith in affection alone, you're building your foundation on sand. You might want to believe that repeated kindness and generosity will buy you lasting loyalty. It feels right. It feels noble. But let's be honest, most of the time it's mistaken for weakness. Machiavelli warned that excessive kindness, especially when it isn't paired with clear boundaries, invites exploitation. When you try too hard to be loved, people start to test you. They push limits, ignore your authority, and look for ways to take advantage. Why? Because kindness without strength signals that you can be manipulated. The world doesn't reward those who make themselves easy targets. Look at Julius Caesar. He worked relentlessly to win the affection of Rome's people, thinking that popular love would secure his power. But when Caesar sought popular love, even his closest allies turned on him. On the Ides of March, those who once praised him became his assassins. That's the reality of conditional loyalty. Love evaporates the moment it's inconvenient, and those who seemed devoted can become your downfall. Caesar's fate isn't an outlier. It's a warning to anyone who thinks popularity is the same as security. Contrast that with fear, not the kind that breeds terror, but the kind that comes from setting clear boundaries and enforcing consequences. Machiavelli never advocated cruelty for its own sake. He recognized that fear, when grounded in fairness and consistency, becomes a stabilizing force. People respect what they can't easily challenge. They avoid crossing the line because they know there are real consequences for doing so. This isn't about ruling with an iron fist. It's about making sure your authority isn't up for debate. When fear is used wisely, it lasts longer than any affection could, because it's based on respect, not fleeting feelings. Think about any leader who tries to win favor by pleasing everyone. It doesn't work. The more they give, the more they're asked to give up. Their authority erodes. In a workplace, a manager who's always trying to be liked ends up with missed deadlines, ignored policies, and a team that feels free to do as it pleases. But a manager who holds people accountable, who isn't afraid to enforce. Standards might not be everyone's favorite, but their team knows where the lines are. Stability follows. People may not love them, but they respect them, and that respect is what keeps things from falling apart. This principle applies everywhere, not just in politics or business. Whenever you offer generosity without limits, you're sending a message. People start to wonder what you'll tolerate and how far they can push you. Loyalty built on kindness alone is fragile because it's always at the mercy of someone else's changing needs. Machiavelli understood this long before modern psychology gave it a name. He saw that respect lasts as long as there's the fear of consequences. Love, on the other hand, disappears the moment it's no longer beneficial to the person giving it. When self-interest comes into play, love is expendable. Take King Louis XVI of France. He was known for his generous spirit, eager to be loved by his people. But when the revolution came, that love offered him no protection. His inability to command respect or assert authority turned him into a symbol of weakness. The same people who once adored him abandoned him, and he paid with his life. Louis XVI's downfall is a stark example of how love, without the backbone of respect, can't withstand a crisis. It's not enough to be liked. You have to be respected, or you risk losing everything. Machiavelli's advice isn't about cruelty, it's about clarity. He knew that people value what they fear losing. When you establish boundaries and consequences, you create a sense of order. People don't push too far, not because they hate you, but because they know what's at stake. This kind of fear isn't violent or oppressive, it's calculated and fair. It allows relationships to function with mutual understanding. When people know the rules and the consequences, they're less likely to test you. That's the endurance of fear, its ability to maintain stability when love falters. Every act of unchecked kindness is a test. Are they loyal because they respect you, or are they simply seeing how much they can get away with? Machiavelli's genius was in recognizing that authority requires a balance. You can draw people close, but you can't let them forget where the boundaries are. Love is appealing, but it's unreliable. Fear, when managed with fairness, is what lasts. But misuse fear, and you risk crossing into hatred. In the next section, we'll reveal the line you can never cross. The difference between respect and resentment is razor thin, and knowing where that line lies is the key to real authority. Understanding how to walk that line could be what saves you from the fate of those who let fear turn into something far more dangerous. There's a difference between commanding respect and sowing resentment, and that difference is razor thin. This is the heart of the thin line between fear and hatred. Machiavelli warned that fear, when used wisely, can anchor authority and keep order. But the moment fear slips into cruelty or becomes unpredictable, it breeds something far more corrosive: hatred. And once hatred takes hold, it doesn't just undermine your authority, it actively works to destroy it. Let's be clear about what sets these two forces apart. Fear that earns respect is built on structure and predictability. It's the understanding that certain actions lead to consistent consequences, applied fairly and without malice. This kind of fear creates boundaries. People know where they stand, and even if they don't always like the rules, they recognize their necessity. It's not about intimidation for its own sake. It's about establishing a climate where expectations are clear and justice is steady. Hatred, on the other hand, grows from injustice, arbitrariness, and humiliation. When fear is weaponized without fairness, when punishments are handed down erratically, or used to degrade rather than to correct, resentment festers. People begin to see the authority figure not as a guardian of order, but as a source of chaos. The result is an environment where loyalty evaporates, replaced by silent plotting and open defiance. That's when fear stops being a tool and starts becoming a liability. History is full of examples that prove this point. Robespierre, during the French Revolution, wielded fear as a weapon. At first, his strict control and readiness to silence opposition gave him unchallenged power. But as his executions became arbitrary, as justice turned into spectacle, fear quickly transformed into hatred. The backlash was inevitable. Robespierre was eventually overthrown and executed by the very people he once ruled through terror. His downfall wasn't just a matter of politics, it was the natural consequence of crossing the line from fearful respect into outright loathing. This isn't just a lesson for kings and revolutionaries. You see it everywhere, even in the smallest circles of authority. Think about a manager who enforces rules fairly and consistently. People might not always like them, but they respect them. Contrast that with a manager whose punishments seem random or who plays favorites. The result isn't respect, it's distrust and quiet rebellion. The principle remains the same. Fairness and predictability keep fear in check, while cruelty and inconsistency breed contempt. It's a paradox that many people never grasp. Fear, when guided by justice, isn't destructive. It sets boundaries, clarifies expectations, and keeps chaos at bay. But the moment you let it slip into cruelty or use it to humiliate, you're not just risking your authority, you're fueling the very forces that will one day rise against you. Machiavelli understood that the best kind of fear is never about domination. It's about creating a space where your authority is acknowledged, your principles are respected, and your followers know exactly where the boundaries are drawn. Consider Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. His reign was marked by strict laws and harsh punishments. He unified a fractured land and accomplished feats most rulers only dream of. But his relentless use of fear, unchecked by fairness, sparked deep resentment. The hatred he sowed outlasted his own life. His dynasty collapsed soon after his death, driven by the bitterness he left behind. Fear without justice is always self-defeating. On the other hand, look at Augustus, the first Roman emperor. He maintained order with clear laws and a consistent hand. Consequences for breaking the rules were real, but they were predictable and seen as just. Augustus understood that the respect of his people depended on more than just the threat of punishment. It depended on their belief that his authority was principled and fair. That's why his rule endured, and why his legacy outlasted so many others. So, what does this mean for you? Whether you're leading a team, setting boundaries in your relationships, or simply trying to maintain your own standards, you face the same choice. Do you enforce your boundaries with fairness, or do you let frustration push you toward arbitrary decisions? Do people respect you because they know where they stand, or do they resent you because your actions seem unpredictable or vindictive? The answer shapes not only your relationships, but also the stability and loyalty you can expect from those around you. There's another layer to this balance, one that goes beyond rules and consequences. Sometimes, the most powerful form of authority isn't loud or forceful at all. It's the quiet confidence that comes from restraint, the ability to hold back, to let silence and mystery do the work for you. When people aren't sure what you're thinking or what you'll do next, it creates a space where respect grows naturally. They watch, they wait, and in that uncertainty, your authority expands. This is the silent power that so many overlook. It's not about being unpredictable for its own sake, but about mastering the art of presence without constant explanation. The next step is understanding how silence itself can unsettle, command attention, and tip the balance in your favor, not by force, but by the weight of what remains unsaid. Power often isn't about what you say, but what you leave unsaid. The silent power of mystery and observation is one of the most overlooked forces in human interaction. When you withhold your words, you create a gap, an uncomfortable space where certainty used to be. People become uneasy, searching for meaning in your silence, second-guessing their assumptions, and projecting their own anxieties onto you. This is not just a passive absence, it's a deliberate act that demands attention and subtly asserts control. Think about how people react when someone expected to speak remains quiet. The dynamic in the room shifts. Silence unsettles because it interrupts the predictable flow of conversation. People scramble to fill the void, and in doing so, they reveal more than they intend. Your silence becomes the focal point, and suddenly, everyone is more aware of you than if you had spoken at length. By saying nothing, you force others to question everything. That's the real mechanism at work. Silence fractures certainty, and in that uncertainty, your influence grows. But silence is not a blunt instrument. It is a scalpel. The difference between commanding respect and breeding confusion lies in how you use it. Too much silence, and you risk becoming detached or irrelevant. Too little, and you become transparent, easy to read. and easy to dismiss. The key is to make your silence intentional, a pause that signals you're listening, calculating, and not easily provoked. When used well, silence is a pause that holds the room, not an empty space that invites chaos. In any group setting, this becomes obvious. Imagine a meeting dominated by loud voices. Most people try to keep up, talking over one another in a rush to be heard. But the leader who remains quiet, who observes more than they speak, gathers information others miss. You see who is desperate to impress, who is hiding something, who is quietly confident. When that leader finally speaks, every ear is already waiting. Their words carry more weight because they are rare. Silence, in this context, underlines authority. It signals that your approval is not easily won and your judgment is worth waiting for. Steve Jobs understood this instinctively. He was known for entering meetings and remaining silent, sometimes for long stretches. Team members would grow tense, over-preparing, unsure of what was coming. When Jobs finally broke the silence, he often asked a single question that reframed the entire discussion. The power wasn't in his words, it was in the anticipation his silence created. But that tension can backfire. Use it too long, and trust erodes. More on balancing this in the next section. This tactic is not about intimidation for its own sake. It's about creating an environment where people pay attention, where they measure their words and actions because they are aware of your presence. In negotiation, for example, a well-timed pause can shift the entire dynamic. The other party, uncomfortable with the silence, may reveal more than they intended or rush to fill the gap with concessions. Silence becomes a tool for gathering information, for reading the room, and for gaining leverage without ever raising your voice. The real advantage, though, comes from pairing silence with observation. When you resist the urge to speak, you start to notice the subtle cues others miss. The nervous glance, the forced smile, the hesitation before a response. These details tell you who is confident, who is insecure, and who is hiding something. Leaders who master this art collect critical information without exposing their own position. They listen not just to words, but to everything unsaid. Non-verbal communication becomes your ally. The way you sit, your posture, your facial expressions, all of it fills the space your silence creates. A steady gaze, a calm demeanor, an unreadable expression. These are signals that you are in control, that you are considering your next move with care. In moments of crisis, a leader's composure can be more reassuring than any speech. People look for stability, and silence, paired with confident body language, projects exactly that. But silence, no matter how powerful, cannot stand alone. If you never act, if your silence is never broken by decisive words or meaningful decisions, people begin to doubt your intentions. Prolonged silence without action breeds suspicion. Followers start to wonder if you are indecisive, disinterested, or simply weak. Authority is not built on mystery alone. It is built on the combination of restraint and timely action. Use silence to create tension, but always follow it with clarity and purpose. Margaret Thatcher demonstrated this balance. She was not afraid to be silent when criticized or challenged, letting her restraint speak for her. But when she did respond, her words were decisive and final. People respected her not just for what she said, but for what she chose not to say. Her silence created suspense, but her actions confirmed her authority. That is the point. Silence is a tool, not a shield. It sets the stage, but it is your actions that define your leadership. The lesson is simple. Controlled silence commands attention and respect, but only when paired with observation and decisive action. When you master this, you no longer need to demand respect. It is given freely, because people sense your strength even when you say nothing. But be careful. If you become too available, if you respond to every demand and try too hard to please, the power you've built through mystery and restraint will crumble. Respect is not kept by silence alone. It is lost the moment you make yourself too easy to reach. There's a hidden danger in always being ready to help, always eager to be liked. When you erase the boundaries that your silence and observation created, you invite exploitation and diminish your own authority. The next challenge is recognizing how the urge to please, how being too available, can quietly erode the very respect you've worked so hard to earn. Imagine a boss who says yes to everything, every request, every demand, every extra hour. At first, it looks like generosity or dedication, but watch closely. The more this boss tries to keep everyone happy, the less respect they command. Their authority fades. People start to expect favors rather than appreciate them, and the lines between leadership and servitude blur. This is the danger of people-pleasing and over-availability. It doesn't start with a grand gesture. It's a series of small choices, agreeing to tasks you don't have time for, letting others interrupt your priorities, smoothing over every disagreement just to avoid conflict. You might tell yourself you're being a team player, but what you're really doing is teaching others to take you for granted. Each time you say yes out of fear of disappointing someone, you're quietly giving away a piece of your authority. The truth is, people notice. They notice who sets boundaries and who doesn't. They notice who's always available and who values their own time. Like Edward II, leaders who bend too much end up manipulated and discarded. His reign is a warning. He handed out favors to win loyalty, but those same people saw his willingness to please as weakness. Instead of earning respect, he lost control, and those closest to him turned into his greatest threats. The lesson is clear. When you try to buy loyalty through endless accommodation, you invite exploitation, not allegiance. It's easy to think that kindness will earn you respect, but Machiavelli's principles cut through that illusion. He argued that true strength doesn't come from being universally liked. In fact, the pursuit of constant approval is a trap. When you make yourself too available, you become easy to overlook. People value what is rare, what is earned, what is just out of reach. The more you offer without restraint, the less weight your words and actions carry. There's nothing special about what's always on offer. You see this in everyday life. The friend who always drops everything to help, the colleague who never says no, the leader who responds to every minor issue immediately. At first, they're appreciated, but soon their efforts become invisible, and their willingness is mistaken for a lack of backbone. People unconsciously test boundaries. When they find none, respect fades, and expectations rise. What was once voluntary becomes an obligation. The person who never sets limits is the first to be blamed when things go wrong, and the last to be thanked when things go right. Selective generosity is the antidote. Machiavelli didn't say to be cruel or indifferent. He warned against squandering your influence. When you give thoughtfully and sparingly, your actions stand out. A compliment means more when it's rare. A favor is valued when it's not automatic. By managing your availability, you signal that your time and attention have value. This isn't about playing games or withholding for the sake of it. It's about showing others that your approval isn't guaranteed and your boundaries are real. Think about how you respond to requests. If you hesitate to say no, ask yourself why. Is it because you fear losing someone's approval? Or is it because you believe that being liked is safer than being respected? The truth is, those who only like you for what you give are never truly loyal. Their affection lasts only as long as you meet their needs. The moment you can't or won't deliver, their loyalty vanishes. That's why people-pleasing is so dangerous. It builds relationships on shifting sand. Modern research backs this up. People instinctively push to see how far they can go. When someone never pushes back, it's taken as a sign of weakness. Authority isn't about being harsh. It's about being consistent. When you draw a line and stick to it, you send a message, you respect yourself, and you expect others to do the same. That's the foundation of real leadership. People may not always like it, but they will respect it. And in the long run, respect outlasts fleeting approval. General Ulysses S. Grant provides a sharp contrast to the people-pleaser. He didn't chase approval or make himself endlessly available to subordinates. He gave orders with purpose, not out of a need to be liked. His restraint wasn't coldness, it was clarity. People knew where they stood with him, and as a result, his authority was never in question. Grant's leadership shows that you don't need to be everyone's friend to earn their respect. In fact, sometimes holding back is the very thing that commands it. So, how do you shift out of the people-pleasing trap? Start by making your boundaries visible. Don't respond to every request immediately. Let others see that your time and attention are not infinite resources. Say no when you need to, and let the discomfort pass. People will adjust. They'll learn to value your yes because it's not automatic. Over time, you'll find that people respect you more, not less, for standing your ground. This is not about turning cold or distant. It's about understanding that your worth isn't defined by how much you give away. When you respect your own limits, others will too. The approval you do receive will be genuine, not transactional, and the loyalty you inspire will be rooted in respect, not convenience. Now that you see why boundaries matter, let's turn rivals into assets without ever issuing a direct challenge. Power isn't always about confrontation. Sometimes it's about patience and letting others reveal themselves. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. The real advantage comes not from striking first, but from holding back and watching your rivals show their hands. Immediate force feels satisfying, but restraint and observation create space for your rivals to expose their flaws. When you allow them to make the first move, you gather information, see their weaknesses, and let them believe they have the upper hand, even as the real advantage shifts quietly to you. It's like a chess match. You don't rush your strongest pieces into battle. Instead, you wait, observe, and let your opponent commit to a plan. Sometimes you even allow them a small win, encouraging their overconfidence. The more they act, the more they reveal what drives them, what they depend on, and where they're most vulnerable. This is the groundwork for a decisive, well-timed move that changes everything. Look at Julius Caesar. His rise wasn't built on reckless attacks or loud confrontations. It was built on patience and careful positioning. Caesar let his rival, Pompey, believe he was in control. He observed, waited, and allowed Pompey's arrogance to grow. When the time was right, Caesar picked apart Pompey's power piece by piece, never rushing into a direct clash until it was to his clear advantage. This wasn't just luck or boldness, it was calculated restraint, the kind Machiavelli admired. By letting his rival underestimate him, Caesar took control of the narrative and dictated the terms of engagement. In the end, Pompey's mistakes did more to secure Caesar's power than any open battle could have. This approach isn't limited to history's great conquerors. It works wherever there's competition, offices, families, social circles. Imagine a colleague who quietly challenges your ideas, undermines your authority, or tries to win others to their side. The instinct is to confront them, to call them out and settle things in front of everyone. But that only gives them exactly what they want: attention, validation, and a public stage. Instead, the more effective strategy is to remain composed and let them overplay their hand. You continue to do your work, maintain your standards, and let them push further. Over time, their attempts to disrupt become obvious to everyone else. They reveal themselves as the source of conflict, while you remain steady and reliable. People notice who is calm under pressure and who is desperate for recognition. The rival who craves attention often ends up isolated by their own behavior. Winston Churchill understood this principle during the turbulent years of World War II. He faced rivals not just across enemy lines, but within his own government. Instead of reacting to every challenge, Churchill often let his opponents talk, posture, and argue. He watched, waited, and let their weaknesses become clear. When he finally acted, it was with authority and purpose, not out of impulse. This allowed him to consolidate power at critical moments, not by crushing his rivals outright, but by letting their own missteps highlight his steadiness. The lesson is simple. You don't need to chase every rival. Sometimes the best move is to let them stumble first. Which rival in your life have you been chasing head-on? What if you let them stumble first? There's a psychological advantage to this strategy that's easy to overlook. When you don't react, when you seem indifferent to provocations, rivals grow careless. They mistake your composure for weakness or inattention. Their need for validation pushes them to take bigger risks, make bolder claims, and eventually expose their own limits. By the time they realize what's happened, it's often too late to recover. You haven't just won a battle, you've shifted the entire balance of power. People respect a leader who doesn't need to prove themselves with every challenge. They trust someone who can wait, observe, and act only when it truly matters. Strategic unpredictability adds another layer. When others can't guess your next move, they become hesitant. Rivals who can't read your intentions are less likely to take bold risks. They're forced to play defense, always wondering if they're walking into a trap. This keeps them off balance, while you remain in control. Machiavelli warned against being too predictable. If your rivals know how you'll respond, they can plan around you. But if you keep them guessing, you dictate the rhythm of the conflict. You decide when to act and when to hold back. The ultimate goal isn't to destroy your rivals, it's to make them useful. True strength lies in making others, even those who oppose you, realize that they need you. When you're indispensable, when your absence would create more problems than your presence, you've turned a threat into an asset. This doesn't happen through force or endless generosity. It happens through patience, timing, and a deep understanding of what motivates people. By letting rivals reveal their own weaknesses, you don't just neutralize their threat, you turn their failures into proof of your own stability and value. This strategy requires discipline. It's tempting to respond, to defend your position, to prove your strength. But the leaders who last are the ones who know when to act and when to wait. They understand that not every battle is worth fighting, and that sometimes the best way to win is to let others defeat themselves. In the process, you gain not only authority, but also respect, the kind that isn't given out of fear, but out of recognition for your judgment and restraint. Every situation is different, and no strategy works in isolation. The real art lies in knowing when to apply pressure and when to hold back, when to show kindness and when to enforce boundaries. Understanding this balance is what separates those who command lasting authority from those who are simply feared or liked for a moment. There's no single formula, but there is a common thread. The leaders who endure are the ones who master both patience and action, both empathy and strength. The next step is learning how to find that balance in your own life. How do you know when to extend a hand and when to draw a line? That's where lasting authority begins. Every leader faces the challenge of balance. You're constantly caught between the urge to be liked and the need to be respected. Too much kindness, and the people around you start to treat your goodwill as a given. Too much strength, and you crush the very loyalty you're trying to build. The art of lasting authority is in the tension between these two forces, never letting one dominate the other. Kindness is powerful. It builds trust, opens communication, and creates a sense of safety. People want to follow someone who listens, who understands, who shows they care. But if all you offer is kindness, you become forgettable. Sooner or later, those you lead will test you. They'll push your boundaries, sometimes without even realizing it, just to see if you'll hold the line. If you never do, your authority dissolves. They stop seeking your guidance and start ignoring your standards. The result isn't harmony, it's chaos disguised as peace. Strength, on the other hand, is about boundaries. It's about showing that your rules mean something. When you enforce consequences, you send a clear message. Respect isn't optional, but strength without kindness is just intimidation. People might comply, but their loyalty is shallow. They do what you say because they have to, not because they want to. Over time, that kind of authority breeds resentment. The moment you show weakness, all that pent-up hostility comes out. The respect you thought you built is revealed as nothing more than fear. Look at Abraham Lincoln. He led with empathy. He listened. He understood. He made people feel heard. But when crisis struck, he acted decisively. He wasn't afraid to make unpopular choices to preserve the Union. That balance, compassion in calm, firmness in crisis, earned him a loyalty that survived even his harshest decisions. Contrast that with Ivan the Terrible, who ruled through relentless force. His empire was held together by fear, but when cracks appeared, there was no real loyalty left to hold it up. His authority collapsed because it was built on terror, not respect. This isn't just history, it's everywhere you look. Think about the teachers, coaches, or managers who left a mark on you. The ones you respected most weren't always the nicest, but they were always fair. They knew when to push you and when to support you. They didn't flinch from tough conversations or hard decisions, but they also knew when to offer a word of encouragement. Their strength gave their kindness weight, and their kindness made their strength bearable. Effective leadership isn't about being one thing all the time. It's about reading the room, reading the moment, and adjusting. In times of calm, you can afford to be generous. You can build goodwill, show flexibility, and let people see your human side. But when the situation demands it, when standards are slipping, when chaos threatens, you have to be ready to step in and enforce order. If you hesitate, you lose respect. If you overreact, you lose trust. The leaders who endure are the ones who pivot smoothly, who never let their followers get too comfortable with either extreme. This principle applies at every level. In the workplace, a manager who only enforces rules without ever acknowledging effort creates a cold, transactional environment. Morale drops, and people do the bare minimum. A manager who only praises and never corrects, on the other hand, ends up with a team that's friendly but unproductive. The only way forward is to reward what's right and correct what's wrong, consistently, fairly, and without apology. People don't need perfection from their leaders, but they do need predictability. They need to know where the lines are drawn and to trust that those lines won't move on a whim. The same is true in families. Children don't respect parents who give in to every demand, nor do they thrive under constant harshness. The parents who raise strong, independent kids are the ones who set clear boundaries and enforce them, but who also show up with support and understanding when it's needed most. That balance teaches resilience, accountability, and trust. It's tempting to lean into what feels natural. If you're naturally empathetic, you might avoid confrontation until problems spiral out of control. If you're naturally strict, you might clamp down at the first sign of trouble, missing the chance to build real connection. The challenge is to notice your default setting and then push yourself to balance it out. Ask yourself, in every situation, am I leading with kindness because it's easy or because it's right? Am I reaching for strength because it's needed or because it's comfortable? The answer changes depending on the moment, but the willingness to ask is what sets real leaders apart. Consistency is what ties it all together. People can handle tough feedback if they know it's coming from someone who genuinely wants them to succeed. They'll forgive mistakes if they believe you're acting from principle, not from ego or insecurity. They'll follow you through chaos if your decisions feel measured, not reactionary. The respect you build this way doesn't fade when circumstances change. It deepens. Balancing kindness and strength isn't a trick or a tactic. It's the core of sustainable influence. It's what makes people trust you, even when you make hard choices. It's what keeps your authority intact when others falter. The world doesn't reward leaders who are just nice or just tough. It rewards those who are both, in the right measure, at the right time. So, ask yourself honestly, are you defaulting to kindness or to strength? And when would you choose otherwise? Your answer shapes the respect you earn and the legacy you leave behind. Because at the end of the day, the foundation of authority is never just about being liked or feared. It's about being respected. Yours. Build a legacy of respect that endures, not a memory of resentment.